David wiped the sweat from his forehead as he crawled out from under the broken atmospheric processor. The red dust of Ashara 7 clung to everything, and no matter how many times he cleaned his tools, they always ended up covered in the stuff by evening. He had been alone on this mining colony for 8 months now, fixing machines that kept breaking down in the planet's harsh environment. The storm last night had been worse than usual. Lightning had struck 3 different processing units, and the wind had torn apart 2 of the smaller buildings near the eastern ridge. David spent most of the morning putting out fires and checking for damage. Now, as the twin suns hung low in the purple sky, he finally had a chance to inspect the mining equipment that sat abandoned near the old excavation site. Walking across the rocky ground, David could hear his boots crunching on the scattered debris. Twisted metal and broken concrete lay everywhere. The company had stopped mining here 2 years ago when they found richer deposits elsewhere, but they never bothered to clean up the mess. David shook his head at the waste. Back on Earth, people would have recycled every piece of scrap metal. A soft whimpering sound made him stop walking. David listened carefully, trying to figure out where the noise was coming from. There it was again, weak and full of pain. He followed the sound toward a pile of collapsed mining equipment, stepping carefully over the sharp edges of broken machinery. Between 2 large pieces of twisted metal, David saw something that made his heart skip a beat. A small creature was trapped under a heavy beam, its silver fur matted with blood. The animal looked like a cross between a wolf and a large cat with 4 legs and a long tail. Its amber eyes stared up at David with intelligence and fear. David had read about the native animals on Ashara 7 in his briefing files, but seeing one up close was different. The creature was beautiful, even injured as it was. Its fur shimmered in the fading sunlight, and those golden eyes seemed to look right into his soul. The company rules were clear about not interfering with local wildlife, but David could not just walk away from a suffering animal. He knelt down beside the trapped creature and spoke in a soft voice. The animal stopped whimpering and watched him carefully. David could see that the metal beam was pressing down on its back leg, probably broken. If he moved the wrong way, he might hurt the creature even more. David ran back to his workshop and grabbed a hydraulic jack, some medical supplies, and a thick blanket. When he returned, the creature was still watching him with those intelligent eyes. David set up the jack carefully, making sure it would lift the beam straight up without shifting sideways. As the beam slowly rose, the creature tried to move but collapsed with a cry of pain. David quickly threw the blanket over the animal to keep it calm and carefully pulled it free from the wreckage. The creature was heavier than it looked, probably weighing as much as a large dog. Its injured leg was definitely broken, but David could not see any other serious wounds. Carrying the creature back to his habitat module, David felt its rapid heartbeat through the blanket. He had never been this close to an alien life form before. The creature smelled like pine trees and mountain air, nothing like the dusty smell of everything else on this planet. Inside his medical bay, David laid the creature on the examination table. He had basic veterinary training from his time working on agricultural stations, but he had never treated anything like this. The creature's anatomy was similar enough to Earth mammals that he could figure out what needed to be done. First, David gave the animal a mild sedative to help with the pain. The creature's eyes grew heavy, but it kept watching him as he worked. David cleaned the wounds carefully and set the broken bone as best he could. He wrapped the leg in a lightweight cast that would allow some movement while the bone healed. Over the next few hours, David set up a comfortable area for his patient in the corner of his living quarters. He made a bed from soft blankets and placed food and water nearby. The creature slept most of the time, waking only to drink water or eat the synthesized protein David offered. On the second day, the creature was more alert. It watched David move around the module, following him with its eyes wherever he went. When David sat down to eat his evening meal, the creature made soft chirping sounds. David realized it was trying to communicate with him. David decided to call his patient Silver because of its beautiful fur. Silver seemed to understand that David was helping and never tried to bite or scratch, even when David cleaned the wounds. The creature's intelligence became more obvious each day. Silver learned to use the water dispenser by watching David, and even figured out how to open the food containers with its good front paw. By the end of the first week, Silver was moving around the habitat module on 3 legs. The creature followed David everywhere he went inside the building, always staying close but never getting in the way. When David worked at his computer, Silver would lie on the floor nearby, watching the screen with curious eyes. David started talking to Silver while he worked, explaining what he was doing even though the creature could not understand the words. Silver would tilt its head and make soft sounds back as if trying to have a conversation. David found himself looking forward to these one-sided chats. After months of complete solitude, having any kind of company felt wonderful. The breakthrough came during Silver's second week of recovery. David was outside repairing a damaged solar panel when he heard Silver calling from inside the module. The creature's cries were urgent and different from its usual sounds. David dropped his tools and ran inside to find Silver standing at the window, staring out at the eastern ridge. David looked where Silver was pointing and saw smoke rising from one of the processing stations. He grabbed his emergency kit and headed for the door, but Silver limped after him. David gently pushed the creature back inside, worried that Silver might hurt its healing leg. But Silver refused to stay behind, making distressed noises and trying to follow David outside. Finally, David gave up and carried Silver with him to the damaged station. As they traveled across the rough ground, David realized that Silver had somehow known about the problem before he did. The creature's senses were much sharper than his own. At the processing station, David found that a cooling system had failed, causing dangerous overheating. If he had arrived an hour later, the whole facility might have exploded. As he worked to fix the problem, Silver sat nearby, alert, and watching for other dangers. David began to understand that Silver was not just a pet or patient anymore. The creature was trying to help him, to be useful in return for the care David had given. That night, as they sat together in the habitat module, David looked at Silver and realized his life on Ashara 7 had changed forever. 3 weeks after finding Silver, David woke up to an unusual sound. Instead of his normal morning routine, he heard Silver making strange calls from the main room. These were not the friendly chirps or worried cries he had grown used to. These sounds were deeper, more urgent, like Silver was trying to communicate with something far away. David got dressed quickly and walked to the main room. Silver stood at the big window looking out toward the mountains. The creature's tail was stiff and every muscle in its body seemed tense with excitement. Silver turned to look at David, made the deep calling sound again, then looked back outside. Following Silver's gaze, David grabbed his binoculars and scanned the rocky landscape. At first he saw nothing unusual, just the same red rocks and sparse vegetation he had looked at for months. But then movement caught his eye near the base of a distant hill. Dark shapes were moving between the rocks, too far away to see clearly. David adjusted the focus on his binoculars and felt his breath catch in his throat. The shapes were creatures like Silver but much larger. Even from this distance, he could see they were built for hunting. Their movements were coordinated and purposeful as they made their way across the rough terrain toward his outpost. Silver called again, and this time David heard an answer echoing from the mountains. The sound sent chills down his spine. It was wild and powerful, the call of predators who owned this land. David realized that Silver's family had finally found their missing member. David spent the morning watching through his security cameras as 12 adult creatures surrounded his compound. They moved like shadows, appearing and disappearing behind rocks and equipment. Their fur ranged from deep black to golden brown, and they were all much bigger than Silver. The largest one, with scars across its face and shoulders, seemed to be the leader. Unlike the frightened and injured creature David had rescued, these animals showed no fear of his technology or buildings. They studied his defenses with intelligent eyes, testing his response to their presence. When David stepped outside to check a sensor array, they watched him carefully but did not approach. Silver became more excited as the day went on. The creature limped back and forth by the window, calling to its family and getting answers back. David could tell Silver wanted to go outside, but the cast on its leg made that impossible. David worried about what would happen when the pack realized their young one was being held inside by a human. The first direct contact happened that evening. David was cooking dinner when Silver suddenly stopped eating and stared at the main door. A few seconds later, David heard a soft scratching sound from outside. He looked at his security monitor and saw the pack leader sitting just outside his door, looking directly at the camera. David felt his heart racing as he considered his options. The creature outside could probably tear through his door if it wanted to get in, but it was waiting patiently instead of trying to force its way inside. David decided to trust that intelligence and opened the door. The pack leader was enormous up close, easily twice the size of Silver. Its amber eyes were the same color as Silver's, but filled with the wisdom and caution of an adult who had survived many dangers. The creature looked at David without fear or aggression, then shifted its gaze to Silver, who was trying to hobble toward the door. David stepped aside and let Silver come forward. The reunion between the young creature and its parent was touching to watch. The pack leader gently licked Silver's face and examined the injured leg with careful sniffs. Silver made happy chirping sounds and tried to play, but the adult creature kept the youngster calm with gentle nudges. For several minutes, the pack leader communicated with Silver in soft growls and chirps that David could not understand. Then, the large creature turned its attention back to David. It approached slowly, stopping just close enough to study his face carefully. David stayed perfectly still, knowing that any sudden movement might be seen as a threat. The pack leader spent a long time looking at David, as if trying to read his intentions. Finally, the creature made a soft sound that seemed almost like approval. It touched Silver gently with its nose, then looked at David again before walking back into the darkness. Over the next several days, the pack established a routine around David's compound. They hunted during the early morning and late evening, but spent the middle of the day resting in the shade near his buildings. Different pack members took turns approaching the habitat module to check on Silver through the windows. David began to understand that these creatures had a complex social structure. The scarred leader was clearly in charge, but other adults also had specific roles. Some were scouts who ranged far from the group, others were hunters who brought back food, and a few seemed to be guardians who stayed close to protect the group. What surprised David most was how they reacted to his daily work routine. When he went outside to maintain his equipment, the pack members would move to give him space but continue watching everything he did. They seemed particularly interested in his repair work, often gathering to observe when he fixed complicated machinery. Silver's leg was healing well, and David knew the cast could come off soon. But as the day approached, he realized he did not want Silver to leave. The creature had become his closest companion during the long months of isolation. More than that, Silver had saved him from the processing station fire and helped him feel less alone on this distant world. The pack seemed to sense David's attachment to Silver. Instead of trying to take their young member away, they began including David in their daily activities in small ways. When they hunted, one adult would stay near the compound to watch over both David and Silver. When they rested, they chose spots where they could see David working outside. The breakthrough in communication came when David was trying to fix a broken water recycler. The machine was heavy and awkward, and he was struggling to position it properly. Silver watched from the window, making frustrated sounds because the cast prevented it from helping. Suddenly, the pack leader appeared beside David. Without any sign from him, the large creature carefully gripped one end of the machine in its powerful jaws and helped him move it into place. David was amazed not just by the help, but by how perfectly the creature understood what needed to be done. As David worked on the internal components, the pack leader watched closely. When David needed a specific tool, the creature would look at his toolkit, then back at David, as if trying to figure out which item he wanted. David began pointing to different tools and saying their names out loud. The pack leader listened intently, clearly trying to learn. That evening, more pack members approached the compound. They arranged themselves in a semicircle around David's door, all facing toward him and Silver. The pack leader stepped forward and began making a series of complex sounds, different from anything David had heard before. David listened carefully, realizing this was some kind of formal communication. The tone and rhythm reminded him of speeches or declarations from human ceremonies. When the pack leader finished, the other adults added their voices in what sounded like agreement or support. Silver responded with its own series of calls, and David could tell the young creature was excited. The pack leader approached David and gently touched his hand with its nose, then did the same to Silver. One by one, the other pack members repeated this gesture, creating a chain of contact between David, Silver, and the entire group. As the ceremony ended and the pack settled down for the night around his compound, David realized something important had just happened. These intelligent creatures had not just accepted his care of Silver, they had accepted him as part of their family in some way he did not fully understand yet. The morning after the ceremony, David found strange markings in the sand around his compound. The pack had spent the night creating elaborate patterns using their claws and paws. The designs were too complex to be random, with symbols that repeated in different arrangements. David took pictures of everything before the wind could blow the sand away. Silver was more energetic than usual, barely able to contain its excitement when David removed the cast from its healed leg. The young creature tested the limb carefully at first, then began running in circles around the habitat module. Through the windows, David could see the pack members watching Silver's recovery, with obvious relief and joy. When David opened the door to let Silver outside for the first time since the rescue, something unexpected happened. Instead of running straight to its family, Silver stayed beside David. The young creature would take a few steps toward the pack, then return to David's side, as if trying to bring both parts of its world together. The pack leader approached slowly, making soft sounds that seemed to be directed at Silver. The conversation between them went on for several minutes, with Silver responding eagerly and the adult listening carefully. David wished he could understand what they were saying, but the emotional content was clear. This was a family discussion about something important. Finally, Silver ran to David and gently grabbed his hand in its mouth, trying to pull him forward. The message was obvious. Silver wanted David to come meet the pack properly. David allowed himself to be led toward the group of powerful predators, trying not to think about how easily they could hurt him if they chose to. The pack arranged themselves in a specific formation, with the leader at the center and the others, in two curved lines extending back like wings. David realized this was another ceremony, more formal than anything that had happened before. Silver positioned David at one end of the formation, then took a place in the center near the pack leader. What followed was unlike anything David had ever experienced. The pack leader began a series of vocalizations that told a story through sound and gesture. Even without understanding the language, David could follow the basic plot. The sounds described Silver's injury, David's rescue and care, and the pack's grateful response. Each pack member added their own part to the story, their voices blending together in a complex harmony. David felt tears in his eyes as he listened to what was clearly a celebration of his actions. These creatures were honoring him in their own ancient way, acknowledging that he had saved one of their own without asking for anything in return. The ceremony continued with the pack leader approaching David and making a series of gentle touches with its nose to different parts of his body, his hands, his chest, his forehead. Each touch was accompanied by a specific sound, as if the creature was marking or blessing him in some way. Then something remarkable happened. The pack leader began to rub its scent glands against David's clothing, marking him with the pack's smell. One by one, the other adults repeated this action, each adding their own scent to the mixture. David stood perfectly still, understanding instinctively that this was a profound honor. Silver was the last to approach, and its scent marking was different from the others. The young creature rubbed against David with obvious affection, making happy sounds the entire time. David realized that Silver was claiming him as much as the pack was accepting him. When the scent marking was complete, the pack leader did something that amazed David even more. The large creature began drawing pictures in the sand with its claws, creating simple but recognizable images. The first picture showed a small figure trapped under rocks, clearly Silver in the mining equipment. The second showed a larger figure helping the small one, David performing the rescue. The pack leader continued drawing, showing David caring for Silver, the pack arriving to find their young ones safe, and finally all of them together in harmony. The story was told in pictures that any species could understand, a universal language of images and emotions. David knelt down and used his finger to add his own drawing to the sand story. He drew a simple picture of himself, alone and sad. Then, another showing himself happy with Silver and the pack around him. The pack members gathered close to see his addition, making sounds of approval and understanding. The pack leader responded by drawing one final image, a complex symbol that seemed to represent the bond between David and the entire pack. The creature pointed to the symbol, then to David, then to each pack member in turn. The message was clear. David now belonged to their family. Over the following days, David learned more about what his new status meant. The pack included him in their daily routines, with different members taking turns staying near the compound while others hunted or explored. When David worked outside, there was always a pack guardian watching over him, ready to alert the others if danger approached. The pack also began teaching David their language through patient repetition and demonstration. They had words for different types of danger, various kinds of weather, and emotional states ranging from contentment to alarm. David found himself picking up the basics surprisingly quickly, especially with Silver's help as a translator. More importantly, David discovered that the pack's acceptance of him came with responsibilities as well as privileges. When a younger pack member was injured during a hunt, they brought the creature to David for treatment. His medical skills were now considered a resource for the entire family. David also learned that his scent marking had changed how other native animals reacted to him. Creatures that had previously avoided the human settlement now recognized him as part of the pack's territory. Some smaller animals even began approaching him for help, as if they understood that he was under the pack's protection. The most touching moment came when Silver began teaching the pack about human technology and customs, just as they had taught David about their own culture. David watched in amazement as Silver demonstrated how to use simple tools and explained human behaviors to the confused adults. One evening, as David sat outside watching the twin suns set behind the mountains, the pack leader approached and lay down beside him. For a long time they sat together in comfortable silence, looking out over the landscape they now shared. The pack leader made a soft sound, and David somehow understood it meant something like family or home. David repeated the sound back, and the creature's eyes closed in what looked like satisfaction. In that moment, David realized that his life had been completely transformed by a single act of compassion. Silver came running over and settled down between David and the pack leader, creating a bridge between human and alien. As the stars began to appear in the purple sky, David felt a peace he had never known before. He was no longer alone on this distant world. He had found his place in a family he never could have imagined. The pack members gathered around them as darkness fell, their presence warm and protective. David looked at each face in the starlight, memorizing the features of his new family. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and adventures, but tonight he was content to simply be part of something larger than himself. As he drifted off to sleep under the alien stars, surrounded by creatures who had chosen to accept him as one of their own, David knew that his rescue of Silver had saved more than just one small life. It had saved his own soul from the loneliness of isolation and given him a purpose he never knew he was looking for. The alarm on David's communication panel screamed through the quiet morning air, cutting through the peaceful sounds of the pack's daily activities. David had been sharing breakfast with Silver when the emergency signal started flashing red across his screens. He dropped his food and rushed to check the incoming message, his heart already racing with worry. The transmission was from corporate security, marked with the highest priority codes. A mining consortium called Titan Industries had purchased the development rights to HFY 7 and was sending a full extraction fleet to strip mine the entire planet. The message was brief and cold, giving David 72 hours to evacuate all equipment and personnel before the operation began. David stared at the screen in disbelief. Strip mining meant they would tear apart the landscape, poison the water sources, and destroy every living thing on the planet. The pack's hunting grounds, their ancient territories, their home, everything would be gone. The message mentioned that native life forms were considered obstacles to be removed, not protected species. Silver sensed David's distress and approached with worried chirps. The pack leader, who had been resting near the compound, rose to its feet with alert eyes. David's emotional state was affecting the entire pack, their bond strong enough that his fear became their fear. David ran outside to where the pack had gathered, all of them sensing that something was wrong. Using the mixture of words and gestures they had developed together, David tried to explain what was coming. He drew pictures in the sand showing the big ships that would arrive, the machines that would tear up the ground, and the danger to all of them. The pack leader understood first, its scarred face growing grim as David's message became clear. The other pack members crowded closer, their concern growing as the leader shared the information in their own language. Soon the entire pack was agitated, with some of the younger adults pacing anxiously, while others made low growling sounds. David knew he should evacuate as ordered. He could load his essential equipment into his transport ship and be off-planet within a day. The rational choice was to save himself and let the pack face their fate alone. But as he looked at Silver and the family that had accepted him, David knew he could not abandon them. That night, David worked frantically to prepare defenses for the compound while the pack held counsel among themselves. Their discussions grew heated at times, with different members clearly disagreeing about how to respond to this threat. David caught familiar words here and there, understanding enough to know they were debating whether to fight or flee. The pack leader approached David as he finished reinforcing the power generators. Through careful communication, the creature made it clear that the pack had decided to fight for their territory. They would not run from the invaders, even if it meant their deaths. David felt a surge of pride and terror at their courage. David spent the next day teaching the pack about human technology and tactics. He showed them how to identify different types of vehicles and weapons, how to use the terrain to their advantage, and how to coordinate attacks using the communication devices he had modified for their use. The pack learned quickly, their intelligence and natural hunting instincts making them excellent students. When Titan Industries arrived, they came with overwhelming force. 12 massive mining ships descended from orbit, followed by smaller vessels carrying security teams and extraction equipment. The fleet landed on the plains beyond David's compound, immediately beginning to set up their operation base. David watched through his telescopes as armed soldiers established a perimeter around the mining equipment. These were not corporate security guards but professional mercenaries, equipped with military-grade weapons and armor. The Titan Industries logo on their vehicles looked like a predator's claws tearing through a planet. The first clash came when a Titan patrol entered the pack's traditional hunting grounds. David had positioned himself on a ridge overlooking the valley, using his technical equipment to monitor the invaders' communications. The pack moved like shadows through the rocks below, invisible to the human soldiers until it was too late. Silver stayed with David, serving as a messenger between him and the other pack members. The young creature had grown fast and strong, its injured leg now completely healed. David could see the intelligence in Silver's eyes as it watched the tactical situation unfold, learning lessons that would serve the pack well in future battles. The pack's hit-and-run attacks were devastating. They would strike a convoy, destroy key equipment, and disappear before reinforcements could arrive. David provided technical support, using his knowledge of machinery to identify the most vulnerable targets. He also sabotaged the invaders' equipment when they were not watching, causing critical failures at the worst possible moments. Titan Industries responded by increasing their security presence and bringing in heavier weapons. They began using aerial drones to patrol the area and set up automated gun turrets around their base. The conflict escalated quickly from harassment to full warfare, with casualties on both sides. David found himself becoming a strategic coordinator for the pack's resistance efforts. His technical skills combined with their natural abilities created a formidable fighting force. He taught them how to disable vehicles without triggering alarms, how to avoid motion sensors, and how to use their environment to hide from thermal imaging. The pack, in turn, taught David about stealth, patience, and the art of moving unseen through hostile territory. Under their guidance, he learned to think like a predator, to wait for the perfect moment to strike, and to disappear into the landscape when pursuit became too dangerous. The turning point came when Titan Industries decided to attack David's compound directly. They had identified him as the coordinator of the resistance and sent a full assault team to eliminate the threat. David and Silver were alone when the attack began. The rest of the pack scattered across the territory on various missions. The attackers came at dawn, using the rising sun to mask their approach. David's early warning systems gave him only minutes to prepare. He activated every defense system he had built and sent an emergency call to the pack, knowing they were too far away to help in time. David and Silver fought side by side, the human using his weapons while the alien creature moved with deadly grace through the compound. Silver had grown into a formidable fighter, its natural speed and intelligence making it nearly impossible to track or target. Together they held off the assault team until reinforcements arrived. The pack's rescue of David and Silver became the stuff of legend. They appeared from nowhere, moving through the compound like ghosts of vengeance. The assault team, expecting to face one isolated human, found themselves surrounded by predators who knew every inch of the territory and fought with the fury of those defending their home. 6 months after the defeat of Titan Industries, David stood on the observation deck of the new research station, watching Silver teach a group of young pack members how to operate simple human tools. The alien creature had become a bridge between two worlds, as comfortable with technology as it was with the ancient ways of its people. The victory over the mining consortium had changed everything. When news of the successful defense reached other human colonies, David became famous as the first person to forge a military alliance with an alien species. Scientists, diplomats, and reporters wanted to study the relationship he had built with the pack. But more importantly, other packs across Ashara 7 began approaching the compound. Word had spread through the complex network of pack territories that a human had proven himself worthy of trust and loyalty. David found himself becoming an ambassador between species, helping to establish peaceful contact with creatures that had previously avoided all human contact. The research station was built on the site where David had first rescued Silver, a symbolic location that honored the beginning of their relationship. The design incorporated both human technology and pack social customs, creating spaces where both species could interact comfortably. The main meeting hall featured a sunken center where pack members could gather in their traditional circle formation, while humans observed from raised platforms around the edges. David's role as pack brother had evolved into something no one could have predicted. He was now the official liaison between the Ashara Colonial Authority and the Indigenous Pack Confederation. Treaties that had been impossible before were negotiated through his unique position as a trusted member of both communities. The pack leader, who David had learned was called Stormwalker in the pack's own language, served as his counterpart in these negotiations. Together they established the first interspecies conservation zones, protected areas where pack culture and human science could coexist. Mining and development were restricted to specific zones, leaving the majority of the planet under pack protection. Silver had grown into a magnificent adult, larger than many pack members and bearing the distinctive silver markings that had inspired its name. But more than its physical development, Silver had become something unprecedented in pack history. A cultural translator who could explain human concepts to other packs and pack traditions to curious humans. The research station hosted a constant stream of visitors from both communities. Human children came to learn about pack culture and environmental stewardship. Young pack members arrived to understand technology and its proper use. David found himself teaching classes about interspecies cooperation to audiences he never could have imagined. The most rewarding development was the emergence of the next generation. Several pack families had established dens near the research station, and their cubs grew up playing with human children who visited with their parents. These youngsters, both human and alien, seemed to accept interspecies friendship as natural and normal. David watched one such group playing in the compound's central courtyard. 3 human children were engaged in a complex game with 5 young pack members, all of them chattering in a mixture of human languages and pack vocalizations. The children switched between languages without thinking about it, creating sentences that combined words from both cultures. Silver approached David on the observation deck, now moving with the confident grace of a pack adult. The creature made a soft sound of contentment as it looked down at the playing children. David understood the meaning. This was what they had fought to protect, the future where both species could thrive together. The success on Ashara 7 had implications far beyond one planet. Other human colonies reported making contact with indigenous species, often using David's experience as a guide for their own diplomatic efforts. The idea that aliens could be partners rather than obstacles was spreading throughout human space. David received regular communications from the colonial authority, offering him positions on other worlds where first contact situations had developed. But he always declined these offers. His place was here, with the pack that had adopted him and the community they had built together. Stormwalker joined David and Silver on the deck, the pack leader moving with the careful dignity of its advanced age. The creature had become David's closest advisor and friend, their bond deepened by the battles they had fought together. Through gestures and their shared vocabulary, Stormwalker conveyed approval of the day's activities. The 3 of them stood together in comfortable silence, watching the mixed group of children below. David reflected on how much his life had changed since that day he found an injured cub in the wreckage. He had expected to spend his career maintaining machines in isolation, but instead he had become part of something much larger and more meaningful. A communication alert drew David's attention to his portable screen. The message was from a newly established colony on the frontier, reporting contact with an indigenous species and requesting his assistance in establishing peaceful relations. David smiled as he read the formal diplomatic language, remembering his own first awkward attempts to communicate with Stormwalker and the pack. Silver made an inquisitive sound, having learned to recognize the alert signals that meant David might be needed elsewhere. David scratched behind the creature's ears, a gesture that had become natural over the years of their friendship. He shook his head and spoke in the mixture of human and pack languages that had become normal for him. David explained that other colonies needed help, but that his work was here, with his family. Silver's eyes brightened with understanding and approval. Stormwalker added its own sounds of agreement, making it clear that the pack supported David's decision to stay. As the twin sons of Ashara 7 began to set behind the mountains, the playing children were called inside for dinner. The scene that followed would have seemed impossible just 2 years earlier. Humans and pack members sharing a meal together, discussing the day's lessons and planning tomorrow's activities. David joined the mixed gathering in the station's main hall, taking his usual place between Silver and Stormwalker. The conversation flowed between languages and species, touching on everything from technical problems to hunting stories to philosophical questions about the nature of friendship and loyalty. A young human girl asked David to tell the story of how he first met Silver, a request that brought pleased sounds from the pack members. David had told this story hundreds of times, but he never grew tired of sharing it. Each telling reinforced the bonds between the communities and reminded everyone how a single act of compassion could change the world. As David began the familiar tale, Silver moved closer and rested its head against his shoulder. Stormwalker settled beside them, occasionally adding details that David had not witnessed himself. The audience listened with rapt attention, even though most of them knew the story by heart. When the story ended, the young girl asked if David ever missed his old life of working alone. David looked around the hall at the faces watching him, human and alien, young and old, all part of the extended family that had grown from his decision to help one injured creature. David smiled and shook his head. He had never been alone since the day he chose compassion over protocol. He had found his true purpose in building bridges between worlds and his real family in the bonds forged through mutual respect and love. The lonely engineer who once fixed machines in isolation was gone, replaced by a man who helped heal the divisions between species. As the evening wound down and the mixed families prepared to return to their homes, David stepped outside to look up at the stars. Somewhere out there, other humans were making first contact with alien species, perhaps remembering his example and choosing cooperation over conquest. Silver joined him under the starlight, followed by Stormwalker and several other pack members. They stood together in the peace they had created, guardians of a future where different species could choose to be family. David had rescued a single cub, and in return, an entire pack had sworn loyalty to him. But the real victory was not in their loyalty. It was in the love they had built together, one choice at a time.